More. Yes.
It's working now. Good.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We are going to start the today help session that as promised in the initial schedule of the class, we have this session scheduled during the semester. And the aim of this one is to help you with the Spark Machine Learning Library, which are the key part of assignment number 2, very specific time. But before that, I want to point out that our agenda will have initial point, which is I'm going to give a quick overview on the big picture where we stand, because there are so many resources, so many products, so many reading that we totally understand that people can get lost. So I'm going just to try to very quickly in 6-7 minutes to wrap up what we are doing, not to lose track, and then Elena is going to go to the specific thing of the machine learning library and the key point of assignment number 2, which is the practical part of what we are studying during this, let's say, few weeks. So what we have been doing since the beginning of the course. By the way, we are almost at the middle of the course. I don't know if you realize this. So don't get lost. We are talking about big data analytics. And since the beginning of the class, we start talking about what is the purpose as a data analyst, data scientist of the subject of big data analytics. And we understand as a data scientist, data analyst, you are interested in analyzing big data, visualizing them, getting insight, and sharing this data. But it is clear that in order to be able to do that, you will have to do some additional stuff like storage, capture, search. So we are not talking about this very specific task as a data analyst you have to do. In order to be successful with big data, you have to do a little bit more, or at least understand what else should be done in order to be successful with analyzing and getting insight from big data. Of course, we talk since the beginning of the course of new architecture, new tool, new method, and new analytical tool skills as a data analyst. And you understand, you already see how you are getting new skills with the amount of reading you have to do about the different tools involved in the in what is big data, in what is big data, a big picture. So in the first 2 weeks, we talk about Hadoop ecosystem. In the Hadoop ecosystem, here is one of the representation with selected component, and you can see there is a intimidating number of components, which of course we understand that it's not possible in a single class to go to all of these components, all of these pieces of software. We just get general idea about what is the purpose of each of them, and we focus it in the 2 main components of Hadoop ecosystem, which is the Hadoop distributed file system with the purpose to store the data in file, and the MapReduce, which is the engine to the computational engine of big data. So that was the main focus of study. And of course, after studying this ecosystem in the reading, we selected a single component of all this ecosystem to do a practical project. So let's put this way. When you think about the first 2 weeks, don't think just about age-based. Age-based was selected as one of the components, of course, very significant component of the Hadoop ecosystem, which is columnar database, very powerful tool to deal with big data, but it's just one of the many. Why one for the many? Because enough for 2 weeks, we cannot deal with practically with more than one of them. So that is the point of what I want to overview here. They are many components, each of them with different purpose. Don't lose track just because we selected one of them to do the practical project for week 1 and 2. After that, we move to the evolvement of the initial Hadoop ecosystem to what is the Spark, which is the next technology, advanced to solve some of the problem which Hadoop couldn't solve, like if you want to work with stream data. Hadoop mostly are very powerful and efficient with dealing with batch processes. But when you have to move to real-time analytic or stream analytic of processes which are happening in parallel, then a new product evolved, which is Spark, which is very appropriate when you can talk about some parallelism in the process which you want to analyze. In Spark, again, another open source product. Since open source, you understand the rule of the open source. Everyone can use it for free and everyone should contribute. And since the contribution is part of the usage of this product, you understand by contributing hundreds of developers, there is improvement constantly, new version, new product, and it happened the same thing in Spark. And then Spark mainly appear in 3 different versions, which are presented here in the 3 column, one standalone on top of Hadoop file system, the other is with MapReduce, and the other is with Yarn and Mesos. So, and this is just the most, let's say, popular. There are more versions. And you understand why so many products in the Hadoop ecosystem and then in the Spark system. Why? Because we are talking about open source community contributing to obtain better product in hand of the data analysts and data scientists. And again, here we have to select what practically we are going to do. We are going to overview all the product, get general idea of what Spark can offer us, and in future where you can use it, how you can use it. But practical assignment, like assignment number 2, is going to focus in just 2 of the Spark components which are in this slide. We are talking about 2 of the very powerful components, the Spark machine learning library and the Spark SQL. That is the selection again. So we have the big picture about all the components in this open source ecosystem, and then the selection of specific component to do the practical assignment. Here, the same philosophy like in the Hadoop ecosystem. So having said that, you understand already what you have been doing during this part of the course, which is 5.5 weeks, something like this, right? You see that in addition to the skills studied before, you have enhanced with knowledge about Hadoop and Spark. You have to have some data management, some data engineering skills in order to deal with big data. And these data engineering skills imply working in the cloud. And you already understand, because practically you have been exposed for several weeks to work in the cloud, that it's not the same like working in your computer. And why we have to work in the cloud? because this is a mandate from the industry today. Whatever job you are going to have, big company, small company, in some fashion, each company today has portion of his information infrastructure in the cloud just because it's more efficient. It's not just cheaper, it's more efficient because somebody else, in addition to that is less expensive, somebody else can manage for you more efficiently. Let's say you are a financial company, why you have, in addition to that, your expertise is in finance, right? Why, in addition to this, to be successful company, you have to run information technology department, which will run your information technology infrastructure. If you can just outsource this as a service to the cloud provider, which are going to provide the infrastructure and the management of this infrastructure. And in addition, this is going to be more efficient by experts in the field and less expensive. And everyone is doing this. And then the data analyst, data scientist will have to perform his duty in the cloud. And of course, you have to learn how to manage, how to use service, how to manage service. And you already have learned that is very important. If you are not using some of the resources, you have to stop the service. Why? Because everyone already at this point, week 5, understand that using the services in the cloud is using shared resources. Cloud is cheaper because we are using shared resources. We are sharing resources. And using sharing resources means we have to obey certain rules. And the rules are, whatever you do is okay, but if you are not working, if you are not using the service at the time, you must stop the service and log out. The same thing, you manage other resources at your home, the electricity, the water, you stop the running water if you are not using, you don't open the window if you are heating your home or you're cooling your home. It's the same thing here. So working in the cloud is not the same working in your computer. You're working in your computer, you just step aside to drink coffee or to have a lunch, but your computer is still running. This is not the way to work in the cloud. If you will be stepping aside, you must log out, you must stop the service and log out, not using these shared resources, because otherwise, if we don't obey the rule of the cloud, we are not contributing to the beauty of using efficient, less expensive resources which are shared. And here the key is not to get to think that, oh, we have limited resources because we are using academic account. It's not because of this. When you get to the company you work, you will have to have this habit of using shared resources. So everything you learn in this class is going to have some usefulness in your future career. We totally understand that is too much because you are learning new approaches to deal with big data. And in addition to that, you are learning some data engineering skills, how to manage services in the cloud, how to use the services, how to manage your resources which are assigned to your personal account. We totally understand that, but there is no other way. There is no other way to be successful in this subject, which is big data. A lot of data analytics with a little bit salt and pepper, which are coming from the data engineering skills. So that are the general idea I wanted to overview, and that you understand that we are talking about very varied with many component ecosystem, which we study in general. We discuss them in the discussion. And for the practical assignment, we select very specific component of this ecosystem to practice more on it. So I guess this is going to be helpful. And I'm going to give the slides to Elena to go to the specific of the machine learning library and the assignment number 2. And to be more efficient, I'm just going to give her the sharing, right, Elena?
Unmute, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is my current policy. Today is what? Almost end of the month, right? Well, this is what I use so far. Anyway, so let's come back. Let's go to the slides. I have several decks here open. This one. Okay. So there are some important rules here. By all means, please do not enter credit card number. Like, you know, you don't enter your social security number anywhere, right? Unless it's something where it actually required. So please don't. If you think that you do, first submit the Salesforce case. Okay, and check with me. Now, here are some important reminders. Please do not upgrade your IBM Cloud account. Well, of course, you need to stop your runtime, because what happens if you don't stop? It continues running until it times out, right? And it's going to consume your hours. So you want to stop the kernel, you want to check, make sure no environments are running, etc. Then please do not open any tickets with IBM. I had a student who attempted IBM to ask ask for help with the code. No. They don't know what your assignment is. All right. So then submit the Salesforce ticket. And recently there was a little change to the Salesforce. So right now it's a different email address that you're gonna be. It's virtual labs. It starts with virtual labs. So the email that you receive, it doesn't come from me directly. It's coming from the Salesforce, okay? So if you believe you're not getting the response, please check your junk folder as well. Now, you need to upload data into the project before you upload the notebook, okay? And this is important. Do not delete the object storage. Honestly, I don't know how to fix it, okay? Now, do not open two notebooks in the edit mode at the same time, because you'll be consuming the resources twice, right? When you run the notebook, do not skip any cells, because in the second cell, perhaps you're going to be using something that's defined in the first cell. Very important, you have to run the notebook starting from the top without skipping any cells, okay? This is important, not sure how to emphasize it. And then also another thing that I've noticed, the credentials. You enter the credentials, you put credentials block in a notebook only once, not twice, but only once. Got it? Okay, and some of you probably, I believe some of you may or may not have followed the instructions, where sometimes when a student asks for help, I see credentials twice in the notebook, not only once, and where it says in the instructions explicitly. Okay. Now, the thing is, you have to make sure that you select the correct runtime environment. If you select the wrong runtime environment, then you're going to consume more, because first of all, you're running it, right? Deleting the notebook does not stop the environment. You have to physically stop the environment. So please be very careful, or you might end up running two environments at the same time. I've done it, but at the time when I've done it, the hours were not limited, or the limit was higher. Okay, now, well, I wanted to show a little bit of the Markdown Cell. So basically what happens is that in the notebook, you have a title, right? And the title, this is a level 1 heading. The level 1 heading is the syntax is a single hash mark, okay? And then here comes the wording. Well, I might need to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Of course, this is going to consume hours, but I have enough hours, so no worries. So let's go back to the project. So this is a cloud park for data. This is just showing me overall how many hours I've used this month. So we're gonna go now to the project. And by the way, here is a little shortcut. If you click on this logo, it's gonna take you to the home page. Okay, so here are my recent projects. I'm gonna just go into Spark demo. And there is, I put an additional example for you. This is, you don't have to do everything that's done in there, but it's for you something to take with you, if you will, as an additional example. Okay, so this is the Fahrenheit data that's used to predict the risk of the heart attack. So let's see here. I have several. I have a notebook. Let's look at the scissors assets, right? You need to look at the source code. This is where your notebooks are, and this is the notebook. So I'm gonna show you. It's a bonus example that you're gonna have after this session. So now I'm not in a edit mode, right? I'm not consuming resources right now, but I will be in shortly. I have to go in the edit mode to show you. But basically what this is a level 1 heading, right? Those are the level 2 headings. This is a table of content. So basically what's table of content? It's a link inside the document to another section of the document, right? Because you have to do that for your part 2, you'll have to do that. So let's see. I'm gonna click on edit. But now I have to be careful because the environment starts up, right? Okay, see this? It's saying instantiating runtime, and this is how much it consumes: 1.5 capacity units per actual clock hour. So it means that if I'm running stuff for an hour, I'm going to consume 1.5 units. Okay. So now it's loading now, and I'll show you. Okay. There are a lot of examples here that you don't have to use in your assignment because you don't worry about the hours, but I want you to take it away from here, if you will. So now see that this is I'm selecting the cell, right? And here it shows me the cell type. The cell type is Markdown. It means it's just the description, right? So when I double click here, this is a syntax. You put this little hash mark, right? And then you put this heading. This is a level 1 heading. And just to run it back, you just run the cell. It's going to convert back to the Markdown. Now, here, this is just the text. Nothing, just the text, okay? Nothing, no special things. Now here, this is a table of contents. So this is what, level 2 heading. Here, this is called the anchor. So somewhere in the document, I have this Fahrenheit data. So if I double click here, do you see this? This is ID, element section ID, Fahrenheit data, right? And this link is going to take me here, right? So what is this little hyphen? This is a bullet point, right? This is a bullet point. And this is what? It's an internal link. Now here you also have an external link. So this is, it's gonna take, this is just the dataset source. It's a link to dataset description, okay? So I hope it makes sense, right? So what is this here? Well, this is done as a table, and I'm listing the set of, okay, I'm listing the set of columns, and this is a target. We want to predict the 10-year risk of a coronary heart disease. This is binary, right? So 1 stands for yes and 0 stands for no. So let me double click here how that's done. Well, first of all, the opening tag is a table, right? That's starting the table and ending the table. So you have to have opening and closing tag, right? Then what else do you have? You have table row, right? Each so the table row tr tag starts the row, and then you have the end of the row, right? And each row consists of the cells, right? So table data, that's another term for the cells. B tag, it makes the text bold. On this one here, this is how you use an images. So this is the URL of an image, okay? Now, another thing that it's done in here, take a look at this. This cell here, it spans across multiple rows, right? So that's what row span does here. On that cell, you want it to span multiple rows, like I believe it's 13. So let's look at this code here. So in the first row, do you see that here you've got this cell here? This is a row span 17. So that's going to be 17 rows, right? Then you see that for that one, the first cell is empty. Then second cell, it has the text variables. Next cell has the description, right? And this cell here, it has the link to the image file, right? And the next row, it has one cell less. Why? Because this cell here in the first row, it spans across multiple rows. Well, you don't need to know HTML, but for people who are interested, I wanted to explain a little bit, okay? Now, so that's what it was here, okay? And again, this little section here, it has its own anchor, load libraries, right? And the link in here, it's going to take it to load libraries, okay? All right, so now I need to load this here. Okay, now run. Okay, so now, why did I say you have to run everything in order? Because see this cell here, what does it do? It initiates the libraries. If I don't run this cell and I go somewhere in the middle, it's not gonna know what my libraries are. It's not gonna work, right? Okay, so let's go back. We're gonna be going a little bit back and forth between slides. So this is a little bit about the syntax I showed you, all right? This is how to do the table. Well, a lot of people might be interested, so that's why I put it here. Another thing is that parsing data, this is important. And you need to edit that part of the, you'll need to edit that part of the code. Most of the errors that students get are because of the invalid parser function. So in here, I had to edit that too. Well, the way you do this, I strongly recommend you go and you list all of the columns and put the column position. Remember that this is Python, right? The positions are numbered starting from 0. So see this 0 through 16. I know I have 17 columns, but I'm numbering them 0 through 16. That's going to save myself the time. Why? What basically parser function does is that it takes one row at a time from the file, and it's gonna split that file. Each line, right? It's a comma delimited list of values, and it's gonna just split this. Okay. So what you do is the logistic regression method. It takes label document as an input. So we need to convert. We need to create an RDD, right, with label set of label documents. So take a look at this. This is it's taking what? It's taking a person ID as an input. So you have to have the first argument has to be some kind of like a unique identifier, right? This is a concatenation of the independent columns that we used to predict the label. Label is a target or dependent variable. In this case, I want to predict if if a person has the coronary risk of heart disease, right? So this is going to be the label. It's a binary. Very important here. It has to be binary, and do not change this word label. You're going to get error. All right. Now what this does here? This will parse the document. It will parse the line rather, and then it will return. This function returns a label document, right? So we need to know three things here. We need to know the ID, and in which position is the ID located. Take a look at this, right? It's going to be what? Patient ID is in position 0, right? So we take that. Then which one is target? It's this one, right? So this is going to be the label. But we need to convert it to, it has to be either 1.0 or 0.0. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, if the values of 16, because remember, each row is the list of values, right? It's a delimited. Is this line split? It's here, it says that so my values are delimited by comma, right? Because it's a CSV file. So here I'm taking it at the value at the position 16. If it's greater than 0, then I'm setting it 1.0 and otherwise it's 0.0. So that's going to be what? It's going to be my label, right? I have person ID is at position 0. Then what am I going to do for my independent? I have to use the concatenation. What I did was, this is just as part of practicing, I tried different combinations, right? So here, this is a combination that I'm using here, right? This is a concatenation of what? Of independent variables, right? What I'm using as a predictor. Now, there is a common error that the student make is this. You know that ID is located at what? At position 0? Some students add the ID here to the concatenation, which is just wrong. Some students add this one here. See this values of 16, it should not appear in this delimited list. Why? Because this is a dependent variable, right? So I think a couple people reported the issue where you got 100% accuracy on the model, which is not possible, right? If you get 100% accuracy, then check your parser function. More likely, you added the dependent variable into this concatenation, okay? So here, this is what it's returning, what label document, right? And this function is being called, where is this function being called? Somewhere down, right? Well, but here, again, you need to be a little bit careful because, well, first of all, you want to make sure that the parser function is correct, right? Next thing is that, Jesus, this is creating the data frame, right? But over here, what is it doing here? Before sending the row to the parser function, we need to make sure that we remove the column headings. How do we know which row is column heading? Well, one of the column name is what? Patient ID, right? So that row that has a column heading is going to have patient ID. You need to remove the column header. Some people forget that, okay? Now, and this one is just going to take this document and it's going to do what? Add this, create this data frame, and then we print what? The first 5 rows. Now here, this is a self-check. If you see in the first row, if you see the column names, it means that you did not remove the headings, okay? Now here, if you see label 0 and 1, it means that you need to check your parser function. It should be 0.0 or 1.0, all right? Well, then what you're doing in here, you're splitting this into splitting the training data into a training set and test set. Well, I decided to use 0.7 and 0.3 in this example. And then you want to print the number of records in the training set and number of records in the test set, right? Well, sometimes you don't want to be printing all records, but it's just showing the first 20, which is good enough, right? And then you are building the model, right? You're using the pipeline, right? So I have slides for you where I did my best to explain what you're doing. So this is what? This is where you're creating the data frame. But see here, it says name. Well, because this is Titanic data. Titanic data has a column name, right? But the data I was just looking at, it does not have a column called name, right? So you want to make sure this is correct, okay? Now, well, this one is just showing you what goes where, okay? This might help a little bit. It's just showing you how to edit this, okay? Exactly what I just showed you, but different way. So here, well, you take the tokenizer, right? It splits person info into words, right? And then you have the hashing function, and then you call the logistic regression.fit method, right? And that method builds the model. Then you have to use the test data to test your model, right? Well, this is just, well, I'll show you that one too, but see this here, Well, this is a prediction for the test data, right? See this? And you also, well, what does it return? It returns the probability that is 0 or 1, right? And you take the value, you take the highest, you look at the highest probability, right? Like for example, the first row, right? The prediction is 0 because you have a higher probability for 0 than for 1, and etc. Right? So another thing is here, this is just doing the cross tabulation. Now, if you see only one rows in the cross tabulation, then you have some error in the parser function. You should see the predictions for the 0 and for 1. Another thing, in this specific data, it's imbalanced. And I believe your part 2 data is also imbalanced. So make sure to discuss it in the paper. Okay? Well, this one is just tabulating the actual outcome and then it's showing the metrics, right? Well, you may ignore this deprecation for now, but in the future, I would have to rewrite this. But this is just for right now, see this? Now, another thing that I wanted to mention is this. You're looking at the area under the rock curve. The area under the rock curve should always be between 0.5 and 1. If you see area under the rock curve 0.3, for example, it means that you need to go back to the drawing board. Something wrong with your code, okay? And that's just the rock curve plot. But before that, very important point on reading data on the credentials. You're not gonna put the credentials block at the top, you're gonna put it here, right? Well, because the instructions are gonna say to put here. So after you do that, you see this, it says enforce schema true. Why am I doing it? Because if I don't do that, my data types are gonna be read incorrectly, right? Then when I'm trying to calculate the average age, perhaps, it's gonna calculate the average ASCII value of an age. See, so it's if you see that the minimum is greater than the maximum, right? Then you probably forgot to add this line of code. Okay, and this is what this is a bucket name, but this is my bucket name. Your bucket name when you do your part 2 is different, right? But this is my part 2. Let's assume this is my part 2. Okay. Well, here is just data explorations, and there is something that I want you to just take away with you. Here you have a lot of numeric columns, and of course you can just plot the histogram for one column at a time, right? But for you, what I did was, this is a function that's gonna loop through all columns and gonna plot all of them like this. See, I plot all of the columns here. This is a custom function, right? So it takes the data frame as an input, and it takes a list of columns as an input. And this is just how you want to see number of rows and number of columns in this output here. Okay. So this is what I did here, and then you just call in the function, right? You just call in this here. You pass the data frame, right? And you also need to pass the list of the columns, right? Also see this one is gonna get the column names, right, from Panda data frame, and this is just the dimensions of the plot that you want to do, right? So that's one bonus. Well, this is another one. Well, this is a pair plot. You're using the Seaborn package here. So this is just showing it's possible. And this is a correlation plot. Well, honestly, if the hours were not limited, then I would say go for it. But just keep it in mind that it's possible to do some correlation plot. And then I could use my correlation plot because see, in this case, I have what? How many columns? 17, right, total? In this case, I would probably want to eliminate some of the columns. Like I can tell you right away, there is a column that shows if person is a smoker and the number of cigarettes per day. Probably I want to keep one, but not both, right? So something like that. And see that the color codes stand for the correlation, right? So the correlation goes between what, 1 and minus 1. But in this case, this is the lowest value. And you probably want to see the columns that are highly correlated, because what's it called? It's called collinearity, right? So you probably want to, well, you have to play with it, right? You have to play with it. But honestly, I did try on my own, just multiple combinations to see what happens, right? But that's for you something to discuss. You have a question on how would you improve the accuracy of the model, something like that, right? So you need to discuss that part. And yeah, so that is just like see it as a present, okay? And that's it. This here, it's parsing the data. But this is like extra visualizations. You don't have to do it, but this is something that I want you to carry away with you from this session. Okay, so that's just most of the code error are where in the parser function, right? This is where most of the code errors are. Okay, so if something is wrong, the first thing what you want to check is a parser function, right? Well, this is just the data that we looked at. I put the description for you, and that's just this is a function that I'm giving you. And so in case like for the future, for any future work, you will have it where you're looking through all the numeric columns and you're gonna plot the histogram for each column instead of doing it one column at a time. And this is how it looks like, right? So this is just the correlation heat map. That's how you'd build it. And those are the packages that you need. The Seaborn package, it's very powerful. You probably heard about it before, right? So that's how you do that. Now, this is important. You have to save, this one is important. You must save your notebook to submit the assignment, right? So hopefully everybody knows how to count until 3, because the assignment has 3 files, right? You need to submit 3 files. If your assignment folder has only 1 file, it means that somewhere either instructions were not followed or you forgot to attach the file, something like that, right? But what you do is this, look, file, and you need to do the save. Well, you're gonna do download and download it as HTML, okay? It's gonna be saved in a folder that is default for you, right? The folder that is set up default for the downloads. Then you can open that file and save it as PDF if you'd like, okay? Now, next thing is, let me see if it's time to stop the kernel. Let's see what's next. Yes, so now, well, this is just another example with the heating and air conditioning system. It just predicting if it's working as expected. It also using the pipeline example. Now, oh, okay, I thought I had, okay, I thought I had another deck of slides. 1 second. Oh, okay, yeah. So here I'm gonna go over this, but before we do that, let's go ahead and stop the kernel. I'm gonna do this. I'm done, right? So I'm gonna do this stop kernel, right? To make sure that it's not running and shut it down. But I want to be sure that I'm not running anything for sure, right? So this is what I'm gonna do. Before exiting, I'm gonna need to go to environmental runtimes and I need to stop. Oh, I'm currently not running anything because I stopped the kernel. But let's refresh, let's see what happens. Because when I refresh it, it's gonna give me the updated. So see this? Well, this is what I have used, 1.3. But I was just talking to you for half an hour. I had 0.7, right? Before I started, so I just used 0.6 now, okay? Another thing that I wanted to talk about is the, do you remember you had the Spark notebook, right? You had the exercises, and I wanted just to, I will give you the answer key for the ungraded exercises. It's here. Well, basically what you did was you did a graded exercise 1 where you had 1 grouping column, right? So the goal here was you show in for the graded exercise 6, right? In the last assignment, you are showing the salary, and then you're showing the number of employees, right? And you were grouping it by salary level. That was a graded exercise. In the first ungraded exercise, you wanted to show the department, and then you wanted to show the salary and a count of people who worked, right, in the department in the first column, at the salary in the second column, right? Well, so you wanted to do something like this. Very simple way to do that is this. You add in the column to the, you add in the non-aggregate column to the where clause, to the select clause, right? You need to add the same column to the group by clause, right? That's it. Then what you need to do for ungraded exercise 2, you just copy this, and you're gonna add another one, right? Here you add in the attrition. That's it. That's it, very simple, right? On paper. And you also need to add the same column to the group by clause, right? So here count is an aggregate column, right? And whatever is, what are you trying to count, right? Select count star as here is number of employees, okay? And then you're grouping by what? Department, salary, and attrition. So that's an answer key for that. And this is showing the partial output. Exercise 3 was a little bit tricky because, well, what you have is that you have a column called attrition. An attrition column stores 1 if an employee left and 0 if an employee stayed, right? So what you need to do is, if you do this, if you take the sum of that column, then you're gonna get number of people who left, right? So if you take the sum, but then count is the total number of people. But when you take a difference, right? How do you know how many people stayed? You take the total number of people minus number of people who left, right? And that's it. And then you group in by what? By department, because the counts are by department, right? This is it. And this is just another way. Well, what you could also do is, instead of doing the sum, you could do the case statements. And on the next assignment, you will have ungraded exercise where you are, we will use the case statements, right? And it's going to be, the query is going to be something similar like to this, but a little different. But here, the whole idea is that I want to show on one line. I want to have one line per department. Then I want to show how many people left, how many people stayed, and total number of employees. So I want my output has to be one line per department, okay? So you're going to get this answer key. Okay, hopefully everybody submitted the assignment, but this is an ungraded exercise. So after this, you're gonna have this answer key. Sounds fair? No? Yes? And I believe I tried to put it inside the slides. I'll check again. Okay, so this is ungraded exercise. Does anyone have any questions while you have me? Or do I need to go over the logistics part? First of all, the part that I was mentioned is the hours. There are several categories of people, if you will. Some of you run out of hours just on the Spark tutorial. Then you need to submit the Salesforce case, and we need to set up the screen share with you because the hours cannot be explicitly added to an account. We need to do something else, and I prefer to do this during the screen share. Some of you have like 3 hours left. Well, if this is the case, please work on the part 1. Those 3 hours are more than enough to work on part 1 of the assignment, right? Well, look what I just did. All I did was just talk through stuff that was done, right? I spent how long? Half an hour, right? And you saw how much I used. So if you're careful, you won't use a lot. You need to stop the service, you'll be good, right? So 3 hours are more than enough for the first part because all you're doing in there is just changing the credential code and the bucket name and running the code. The second part is where you're writing stuff, right? So probably if you used up the hours for tutorial and for the part one, it depends. Sometimes I may tell you what to do, or sometimes I may have a screen share session with you to give you the code. Okay. And another environment where a notebook could be crafted. Yes. Well, good question. Yes, Nick. If you have another environment where you can craft the notebook, go ahead. And then you still have to import the notebook to run it. That would not have worked for the tutorial assignment because you had to look when you did an exercise, you had to look at what exercise above it returned, right? But since this, for part two, you're doing a separate notebook, I think I like your idea. This is excellent because otherwise, when you go into the when you go into the edit mode, it's consuming hours, right? And I believe one of your schoolmates, Melissa, I believe she suggested the same idea. So go for it. I would say go for it. If you're familiar with the environment that you could use, right? And I would appreciate if you could tell me the options. Yes, the Docker was also presented, but the thing is this option is for very technical people, right? If you know how to change the settings, etc. I'll admit that myself, I was unable to get it to work because I was unable to turn on the virtualization on my laptop. So you have to have the container feature turned on and you have to have virtualization turned on. So that requires editing BIOS and etc. So it's a lot. You really need to be technical and you need to have, it would help to have the work-related experience in that area, okay? Yes, so Docker is a solution for people who are experts in this area, I would say. There are multiple options, and I like the options where you can edit it somewhere else, right? Without touching the hours, and then you upload it this, but you also have to be good at debugging stuff because more likely there could be syntax errors and etc. Okay? But definitely while you're writing the code, you don't want to be consuming the resources, okay? I like it. Good point. Right? So anyone else wants to give anything, any tips? Well, I know that one person in session 9040 still has hours left. After doing both parts of the assignment and the tutorial, I think he has at least 3 hours left. I could be wrong, but still has hours left. Okay. Well, for the next assignment, the hours will be reset on the last day of the month. It's in the evening. Okay, in the evening, late evening, depending where you are located. So yeah, but for the next assignment, the good news are first part does not consume hours, right? But I'll have to retest it, but as far as I know, it did not consume hours last semester, and RStudio part does, but that's okay. Well, we'll work on it when we get there, but let's get this assignment out of the way first, okay? So some of you need to submit the ticket, right? Well, Professor Azan, after this, or when you get chance, please give me the list of students who ran out of hours during the tutorial. Because, well, I have a tracking file where I track which code was given and to whom. So, yeah. Okay, so if you run out of hours for the Spark tutorial, you want to submit the Salesforce case because I need to have a way to track, right? Such as your name, the new code number, and the ticket number, etc. I have to have a way to track. One way to do that is in Salesforce tickets. So please do that. Okay. Anyone, if you're not using the Docker, but if you need the hours, right? Well, because explicitly you cannot add the hours. There is something else that we need to do. And I want to make sure that I watch how you do it, because if you did it right, if you did it wrong, it's a waste of the code, okay? It's a waste of the feature code that I'm gonna give you. Well, in summary, you would have to create the new IBM Cloud account with personal email. But I would like to watch to make sure that it's done correctly, because first of all, in order to work with a different IBM ID, you have to close all browser session. You have to clean up the whole cache, because you want to make sure that you log in with correct account. For some of you who already had a session with me, probably know what I'm talking about, right? Some of you probably know what I'm talking about now. Okay. So yes, I'll look forward for your case. Okay. Any other questions? So what you're gonna do after this session? You're gonna submit the case, right? Okay. You assume that? Okay, hold on. I'm trying to read the code. Okay. Successfully completed the code for part 2, but the area, it has to be 0.5 and 1. That's right. Oh, if produce 0.47, that you need to look at the parser. This is incorrect. You need to look at the parser function. More likely, well, oh yeah, remember your ticket. The first issue was using the dependent variable as one of the independent columns, right? Then make sure that you're not using the ID as part of the independent columns. Make sure that you remove the column headings, right? You need to check that, okay? But this is incorrect. It has to be above. To be honest, it's somewhere. It depends on how you run it, but it could be near 0.6, something like that, or 0.55. That should be correct. Okay. Oh, you cached credit. Oh, yes. Well, this is a problem. See, yeah. Well, some people, they get into the habit of the saving. Well, yeah, some people get into the habit with saving password in a browser, so that's why. Yeah, that's a good point about AVC also. But you need to check. You need to check to make sure it has to be between 0.5 and 1. If not, then I would have to look at your parser function, because something is wrong somewhere. So I would recommend listing the columns. Okay. Yeah. So I think, okay, I believe that was you, right? You still have hours left. Yeah, but I mean, you want to look at you want to check all issues start from the parser function, and then also not removing the column names. Those two major issues I've seen, because there are some issues that people repeat over and over. Okay. Yes, makes sense. Makes sense, right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So anything else? Anything else? Well, I just showed you a few things to how to check your work, right? To make sure that you're getting it right. Because if you make an error, if you make an error, right, then your results are going to be incorrect, right? Then your interpretation is going to be incorrect, and etc. You want to get more or less correct results, or at least that makes sense, right? So if area under the ROC curve is under 0.5, something is wrong, right? Remember that from at least data 630. I'm not sure, maybe 640 also. Well, I just showed you several ways how to check your work. This is one. Another one, make sure that column header is removed. Another one is a parser. There are several parts in this notebook where people make errors, and I pointed them out. Well, of course, you see something new each semester, but you know. Anything else? Any questions? So yeah, it's caching the credentials, login credentials, yeah, but it creates IBM, it creating the cookies. So sometimes you want to clear it out before logging in with a different ID, because the new code that you're gonna get, you'll have to apply it to the new ID, because applying the new code, right, new feature code to your existing account is not gonna do anything. You cannot add hours to an account. You just cannot, you're stuck with it, okay? And another thing that you might have noticed that those who ran out, you consume more hours than 10, you consume more than 10 hours. Well, that's because right now the service is not programmed to stop when your hours run out. Like for instance, the service keeps on running, the environment keeps on running. It does not check if your hours actually run out. It just keeps running until it's idle. But you won't be able to start something new. If you run out, you won't be able to start anything new. But whatever was running, it kept running. So that's why one of you, I believe you ran something for 174 hours. Yeah. So the service, the environment kept on running until it timed out on its own. But if you close the browser, right, you're not stopping the environment, it keeps on running. Well, in theory, you would think it should stop once you hit an hour limit, but no, it did not happen. Okay, so just watch out. Be super careful, okay? Anything else, guys? Well, I mean, Professor Azan, anything you would like to say? Or Professor Gorchova? Anything you would like to add to the discussion?
No, all good, Yelena. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. I guess
I think everything is okay, because if there are no more questions, I think we covered most of the thing. The session was intended also to answer a question. Maybe people have not started working. I'm not sure.
some of them have based on the tickets. I mean, yeah. Some have not. I don't know. Some have been quiet. Yeah. But it's due next week. So see if you look at the calendar, right? It's due on the 28th. Yeah. I mean, the work piles up in this course in no time. So if you're submitting late, keep in mind that you're leaving yourself less time for the next assignment. And it keeps on going. But at the end, there's no way to extend the semester, right? Well, just keep that in mind. I'm speaking as a former student. So even if you got more time on the assignment, think about it. Is it going to help you really? Because it gives you less time on the next assignment. Just think about it. You want to keep up, okay? So I'm gonna be expecting a large volume of tickets this weekend, right? You're gonna need help with the hours and etc. Okay?
Well, usually what most students are most difficult in this assignment is the parser function.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
I don't see anybody asking anything regarding. Let's see how they are going to do. Maybe that is a trend from previous semester. I think just that is telling me people have not started. Or if
Yes.
they started, they are just in the beginning.
That's right. That's right. But you really need to schedule time for this assignment because it's a big one, and assignment 3 and assignment 2, those are big ones. So you really need to make sure you schedule enough time. So check your calendar and make sure you have to find time for this assignment. You have to make time. Okay? Yeah.
Well, I think if there are not questions, we just end the session and everyone is going to work and question will be answered later as they come.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna just stop the recording and You're gonna get, everybody will get the recording. Now I need to
And
figure out-
wishing everyone a good evening.
Okay.
Mhm. Bye.